Welcome to The Pod, a podcast for women in healthcare leadership, a heartfelt space where women executives in healthcare and their allies unite to support and uplift each other with personal stories that inspire positive change, nurture optimistic mindsets, and celebrate diverse perspectives. I'm your host, Dr. Kristen Woods. Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It's the courage to continue that counts. Winston Churchill. Today on the pod, we welcome Dr. Amelia Bueche, who is a board-certified physician in neuromusculoskeletal medicine and osteopathic manipulative medicine. She's also the founder and director of This Osteopathic Life, an author, a cellist, and a certified physician life coach. Dr. Bueche has dedicated her career to integrating the osteopathic principles of mind, body, and spirit into both her medical practice and her work supporting physicians in finding success, satisfaction, and ease in their professional lives. Through This Osteopathic Life, she shares her philosophy that the osteopathic principles of recognizing our common unity, our capacity for self-healing, and the relationship of structure and function can be applied powerfully to encourage healing, not just for individuals, but for families, communities, and humanity as a whole. Beyond her professional work, Dr. Bueche is a parent, athlete, and entrepreneur who embraces life in the North. She and I first connected early in our years of medical practice and discovered we share passion for running, endurance sports, and the unique lifestyle that living in the North offers. As of late, we reconnected, and we found that our professional and personal journeys also encompassed many commonalities over the year. I'm so delighted to welcome her to our show. Amelia, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a delight to reconnect with you.
The pleasure has been mine. And so let's just kick off with what's bringing you joy right now?
I love that. I'm sitting in my upstairs. I look at a football stadium across the street from my house, and it's winter here in northern Michigan, and learning to be at peace with that. So as I shared with you before we started the call, I ran this weekend, and running has been a lifelong sport for me. It has tapered off in recent years, but I covered my favorite distance, 15 kilometers, 9.32 miles, which was our common distance for the Muskegon Seaway Run back in the day. And it was slow, but it was so sunny and so lovely. And I was grateful that my body cooperated. So I think it's been resetting pace and appreciating whatever is present in the now moment, even if it might not be the ideal conditions of our favorite seasons.
Oh, that is a beautiful answer. And I get up every day and just repeat to myself, we are one more day closer to spring. I love, though, how you're talking about finding joy in the moment. And so one of the things I also like to do is remind myself that if it's 90 out in August, I might appreciate one of these cooler, snowy days. So we always want what we don't have.
Yes, and I learned recently my birthday is the 1st of February, which is Imbolc. I didn't know that word. I didn't know that experience, but it's the halfway point between winter and spring. And I love that inflection moment because we're not there yet. We're not all the way to spring, but there's some hope in knowing we have turned a corner. And so, like you said, each day we're closer than we were before. We're closer to spring than we were to the start of winter. And that somehow brings me some relief as well.
So I'm giggling because I didn't know that. And there's another commonality that we have is my birthday sits on the winter solstice. And
I love that.
So I always look forward to my birthday because it means every day after that starts to get a little bit longer from the sun perspective. So,
and isn't that so funny that the summer solstice, it gets shorter? I think that's so strange because it seems like, right, the bigness of summer has just arrived, especially for those of us in northern climates of the northern hemisphere. And yet it means the light is going away. And so it's such a fascinating kind of mind meld to wrap around.
It is. Well, I'm really interested in having you share your journey as a physician and how it's evolved over the years.
Well, it's been an interesting one. And I wanted to be in medicine since I can remember, but it was as a veterinarian earlier in life. And I learned pretty recently. I'm the youngest of 6 by a pretty big margin. And I kept saying, like, I don't remember when I made that shift toward human medicine instead of animals. And my oldest sister said, oh, I told you, you just wouldn't make any money there. And, animals are kind of boring. And I thought, oh, I had no idea. Someone else influenced me to pivot from my original dream. And along the way, too, siblings will get you when you're the baby of the family. I knew that I wanted to practice osteopathic medicine as soon as I learned about it. I shadowed 2 physicians, a husband and wife. One was an MD, one was a DO, and it just seemed aligned. The concepts of osteopathic medicine. And then Michigan State had that program available. I was happy to stay in my state. I was dating a person at the time who was going to school there. And so I just applied to one medical school, and I thought, if it's meant to be, it will be. And I did get in early admission. I had to fly home from study abroad in England actually to interview, because I traveled for my study abroad in September of 2001, which was a very strange time to be traveling and flying. And things got kind of bungled up in the admissions process. So I returned home, I interviewed, I was accepted, and then I delayed for a year because one of my other siblings said, you can't graduate college in 3 years and start medical school when you're 20. Like, it's too young to be a doctor. And I thought, okay. And I took the year off to do triathlons, and I tore my ACL 1 week in. And so that kind of derailed the whole process of that year. But I did start in an immobilizer. I had my surgery right before I started medical school. And I loved it. And I loved the osteopathic manipulative medicine lab. And I had a kind of a natural knack for it, just the palpatory skills, the engagement with anatomy, and the ability to do something right away. We went home to our first Thanksgiving break, and I could treat people's ribs and bring them relief. And it felt like I was already engaging with medicine from that standpoint. And so as I got to the end of my medical school career, debating residency programs, I thought I would travel, maybe move out of state, but I was pregnant at the time, and that can also be a difficult time to make decisions. My son was born 2 days after medical school graduation, and I ended up staying in Muskegon, where I had trained, and my first ever rotation, as the asterisk here, was in your office, right in the family medicine office there. And I began the family medicine program in about 3 months in. I thought, this is not it. This is not how I envisioned anything to do with medicine. And I went to Dr. Dora, our DME at the time, and I said, thank you very much. I'm done, and I'm going to go be a personal trainer. This is not for me. And thankfully, he had the wherewithal to say, well, you've invested some time and some money. Maybe there's an option that you don't have to jump ship entirely. And at the time, we had an osteopathic neuromusculoskeletal medicine +1 program, meaning you could complete a residency and then engage in that. But I did not want to wait out those 3 years in the family medicine that was being presented to me. And so we had about a week to get the application underway, and we created a 3-year program in osteopathic neuromusculoskeletal medicine. And I became a founding resident. I eventually became the program director, and that felt much more aligned with how I understood the practice of osteopathic medicine. I had more time with patients. I could apply hands-on treatment. We had a consultancy in the hospital, and it was just a very integrated way to participate. So that felt much more aligned for me. And honestly, I anticipated being in Muskegon forever. As I stayed on for an arc of 10 years, I loved the community. I was able to kind of revamp the practice architecturally and the curriculum design and new faculty. I actually changed our schedule secretly, kind of underneath the radar. So we had a much better working environment, and patients were happier. But then personally, my husband at the time wanted to move. And so I picked up and moved to Oregon and started a solo private practice out there, which is a wildly different experience than being in the second largest healthcare system in the nation as a way down the line consultancy, to now be kind of the first line of medicine, because many people in this community didn't see physicians and didn't trust medicine. So they would see me kind of as that, like, dipping my toe in the water. So I was working up all kinds of crazy things. I diagnosed pancreatic cancer from a rib pain. It was just a weird world. And it expanded my practice of medicine. And I owned a gym at the time. So it was like bringing different diversity toward me. But the pandemic came about, and they closed all ancillary clinics in the state of Oregon at the time, which included osteopathic manipulative medicine. And I remember having this thought as I walked home from clinic that I'm not going back. And I didn't know what that meant. And I had enrolled in coach training at the time, many months prior, not knowing a pandemic was upon us. And in our first session, the coach trainer said, coaching isn't about telling anyone what's wrong with them, because nothing is wrong with them, right? They're not broken, and they have the answers. It's not up to you. And I thought, I've just been a coach this whole time. And it was very liberating. And at the time, having to work remote, it gave me the chance to expand what I found to be the osteopathic concept, and coaching had a lot of overlap. I started writing curriculum. I was working with other physicians who were training as coaches and bringing these programs into the institutional setting. And so that felt very much like arriving to the true practice of medicine for me, even though it wasn't hands-on care, which I was totally used to. Every patient I saw, I touched, they received treatment. But it also really felt like I was being the most osteopathic I had been, and my reach was now much wider. And so that's how it's been up until now. Due to some different personal exchanges in my life, there has been a pause in the coaching, which has allowed me to sit and reset and decide what is it that I want to rebuild. And, having tried to jump ship myself a few times along the way, now the universe is giving me this opportunity to reconsider. And from that, this book was born, and I'm happy to talk about that. Coaching continues. I've actually restarted a small clinical practice, which I think will always just be a part of me. And it felt right to have that accessible and available in our community because I do see the merits and benefits of hands-on care. And then seeing what else, like how can I now take what has been created and crafted in this space and move it maybe into different industries. I still continue to coach primarily in the medical sector, but I see how it can be helpful across a wide range of spaces. And particularly in my own town here in Traverse City, there are a lot of small businesses. And so seeing how health can be painted across a lot of cultures.
Yeah, what an amazing answer. And I'm really blown away by your agile thinking. So from the information that your siblings brought forward to you, and how you stayed open and curious to that, and all those different inflection points that allowed you to grow a professional life that's bigger than traditional clinical medicine. I'm a little concerned that your rotation in my family practice clinic was part of the reason you chose not to go into family medicine. We might have to unpack that later.
Not at all. Not at all. Actually, your practice of medicine was probably one of the most inspiring for me. It was what the residency represented. It just, and there's nothing wrong with it. I totally honor primary care medicine and I admire what's able to be done. It just didn't match for me. And my oldest son today asked me what my favorite word was. And I brought up the word resonance. And, I love it for its musicality. I'm a musician and actually like music and medicine were always kind of this toggle for me. But it means like, when something is for you. And I just knew that it wasn't. And it wasn't because anything was wrong with family medicine. It just didn't match me. And to be able to know that and choose that and find something that did has actually been kind of this growth lens of my life, so I think that's the piece. But by no means, I think if I told you, even watching you round on OB with your kids present in running clothes, I was like, yes, right? If I was going to do it, I would do it how you did. It just wasn't what I was meant to do. And thank goodness, because much like I got cut from the basketball team in high school, which led me to running, and I would have been a very mediocre basketball player, but I was a pretty excellent runner. And similarly, like I think I would have been all right at family medicine, but I'm pretty exceptional in the neuromusculoskeletal world. And so I accept those moments of guidance from the universe.
Yes, being open to that. I love the word resonance. And we should talk a little bit about your book. You mentioned it briefly, and I'm really blown away by the creativity that you brought to this book. And clearly you bring that same creativity to your life. But I'll let you talk about it. You're the expert in it. Tell us about Beyond the Pain Toward Life as You Wish.
Absolutely. So I've had books in my brain forever and ever. And, they've been different novels and different, medical, or should I make it coaching? Do I take the curriculum that I wrote for my CME program and make it a book? And they all might be eventually. But it was about a year or so ago. I was watching a film called The Tipping Point, and it was about the opioid crisis and pain management. And I also completed the osteopathic health policy fellowship. And as I'm watching this film, like kind of on the edge of my seat, having lived both alongside, substance use personally with people in my family and then in medicine, it was just remarkable to me to see all these pieces come together and how can we be better and have more direct outreach. And I thought, okay, I need to write about this. And so I sat down and I put together this, what I called the pain detective protocol. And I've spent my whole life treating pain, right? That's the primary reason people come into my office. Coaching, there's a lot of, mental and emotional pain that's alongside it. And as I thought about, I talk about health for the health of all things. And I try to look through that lens. Osteopathic medicine is about seeing the health, not the disease, and, finding the good, but not to the negligence of disease. And I thought maybe people need to hear it more directly through the name of pain. And so the pain detective was born, and I created this 7-part protocol. And I thought, what could this be? Could it be a course? Do I incorporate it into my coaching? And there was a moment somewhere a couple months later where I thought it would be a great book. And I love The Princess Bride. It was the first movie I ever saw. I saw it as a little sibling at Michigan State University the year it came out when I was 6 years old. And I've watched it incessantly since then. And it was the name of my gym. CrossFit Inconceivable was my gym. And it's shown up in so many different spaces of my life. And Live Inconceivable has been a big part of my brand. And I thought, they talk about pain a lot in this movie, actually. And they talk about love. And love is really the antidote to pain ultimately. And so I put it together through the lens of the Princess Bride, and each chapter is a character, and it talks about internal family systems, which is a modality of therapy. And I hope that it makes it an approachable way to both see pain, not be fearful of pain, to recognize that there can be power found within it, and also to have some play and to find ways to be relatable to a therapeutic concept and make it applicable to a wide audience, with some special threads in there for physicians, because that will always be a core audience for me, and workplace wellness, because I think at a core level, if we can improve the culture in workplaces, which exist in so many different sectors, that translates to better health and reduction of pain overall. So that was a long way around to a relatively brief book. It's about a 2-hour audiobook, and in this day and age, I think it's about where our attention span can lie. And also for me, brevity is not my forte as I tell these longer stories. So it was actually an act of discipline to say it in fewer words and let it be concise and kind of stand alone in that way.
Well, I enjoyed it hugely. I'm a huge fan of The Princess Bride as well. And I've read the book. And have you read the book?
Mm-hmm. I have. My friend got me a beautiful new edition this Christmas, but I read it in the past as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and the book is as good as the movie. The characters really come to life through the actors. And
yes.
It's beautiful. What blew me away were the vulnerability and rawness of your own self-reflections. And I'm wondering, what empowered you to feel so confident and courageous as to be able to, or that helped you share those reflections?
Yeah, I think in this journey, so as I mentioned, I've gone through my own transformation, transition. I was in a relationship for 20 years, married for the majority of it, and divorced somewhere in the 4 years ago round. Time is a little bit fluid in the post-COVID instance. And that course of action, right, that transformation point of my life was hugely vulnerable. And having other people speak to their experience was really meaningful. And then in my CME programs, watching physicians speak to their own vulnerabilities, I see how much connection that draws. And there's a concept where it's like we don't share our wounds before they're healed. And so it was knowing like how much is safe to share for myself, and also to present to the world as a business person, as an entrepreneur, as an author. And the writing of that book was really an experience of channeling, if I'm honest about it. I had the outline of the pain detective protocol, and I had the 7 types of pain. And then I kind of pulled through the format of each chapter for those who would like to read it. Every chapter has a similar format, but the introduction is the bulk of the book. And a person who was listening to it early on said, it's like twice as long as every chapter. I said, yeah, because that's the heart of the book. The chapters are great and they're meaningful, but it's really about the experience of it. And then I'm asking, and I say inviting, perhaps more than asking, a person to walk through the journey of the pain detective process. So at the end of each chapter, there's an opportunity for you to walk through and explore. And it only seems fair, appropriate, and inviting for me to offer that myself. So here's when I reflect on this character, what came up for me, and to bring the humanity into it. And I think that's where we miss a lot of opportunities for connection, when we stay guarded and we stay perfect and we stay performing. And that was me for most of my life. Again, I'm good at a lot of things. I own that. But sometimes that excellence and amazement and achievement can actually create space rather than build connection. And so being able to both be strong and achieving and vulnerable, I think is a sweet spot where we can live. And that was my goal, but it really happened quite organically. I wrote that book in a relatively short amount of time. Once I had, the layout and the outline, the writing of it almost just happened in a couple of sit downs. And when I went to record it, I produced it relatively quickly because my dream was for Rob Reiner to read this book and feel seen and heard for what he produced in the film. And then when he died, suddenly in December, I sat down on that day and I recorded it, and I produced it as an as you wish, pay what you can model, as an act of healing. And I hope someday the actors who are part of The Princess Bride can see it and feel that resonance, because for me, that's what that movie has been. It shows us how pain exists, how we can, champion it, and how love really is what's going to lead us through. And that could be self-love. It could be love for people in our lives, professionally. And I think that's really what called me to speak through the book that way.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I want to acknowledge the sadness and grief at Rob Reiner's passing as well, his untimely passing. As you wrote the book, what additional things did you learn about yourself through that process?
Yeah, I think like most things, we teach what we need to learn, we write what we need to hear. And like I said, I wrote it pretty quickly and I did some edits, but then when I went back to record it, I was like, whoa, like that's in there and that's really good. And I have a friend who's listening right now. We're going to host the book for my yoga studios book club at the end of the month. And she's like, I can hear how much you like this book, and not in this egotistical way. She's like, you really are loving what you're saying in these words. And that's how it felt. And almost was like, what? Like, that's in there? And I wrote it. I was there. But it was kind of coming back through it. In each chapter, those reflections were true healing points for me. And healing is always in process, right? We never arrive somewhere. And that's the good and the bad news of it. And so it was hearing it again through a different moment, because I've had different stages of my life professionally. I've had different personal relationships develop. So seeing those components of the pain detective process and being able to say what's happening for me now and what aspect of self is coming through. And I appreciate that you notice like confidence and courage. Those are two of the 8 C's of self. If we look at the internal family systems concept, and it's inviting more and more of self through. And Dr. Richard Schwartz, who founded that concept, discovered it, synthesized it, however you want to think about it. His dream, right? His mission is for more self to be present in the world, because his belief and hypothesis is that if we can live more in self energy, there isn't space for violence and there isn't space for war. And as a person who would like to revamp and change all systems, and practice nonviolence and better food and health, if we come from self energy, so many of those problems almost can't exist. And so I think being in self energy as much as I can is the way I can offer that to the world, to my children, to patients, to coaching clients, to colleagues. And I think that's where my hope is as well. So I share that. And I think writing it through the lens of IFS, it adheres to his mission. I, pay homage to his work in the book, but saying it through a different lens of The Princess Bride might help other people to hear it and invite them to experience more self-energy rather than to be stuck in all their different parts.
Yeah, and the talking about being stuck in those different parts and the energy and the presence that we want to live in, you wear a lot of hats. You're a cellist, you're a physician, you're a mother, you're a sibling, you're an author and a coach. So, the list goes on. You're a curious person. You do a lot. You've achieved a lot. How do all those different hats that you wear complement and inform each other?
Thank you for that. And Never One Thing is kind of a mantra for me. It's also a brilliant song by the artist May Earlywine, who is from Traverse City. So I strong recommend that. You can put it in the show notes if you like. And it's been both a point of, liberation and life lessons, and also a lot of limitation. Many people, I was at a business school for a long time, and it was like, pick a thing, pick a lane, make one offer. This is not, people are confused. And I recognize that as solid business advice, and I can't live it, for better, worse, or otherwise. It just never has been. In high school, I played a sport every season. I played cello every day. I worked, I volunteered. It's just who and how I am. And I do think they complement each other. And I will say that, I felt more like a physician when I was a coach, and I recognized that my coaching was always present in my physicianship. I for sure know that coaching has improved my parenting, like hands down. There's nothing that has been better for me and my children. It saved my life, right? It got me out of a toxic and dangerous relationship. And it has helped me to do all the other things with a little more grace. And I think you relate as a high performing person with high expectations. You race to win, or you play cello to be first chair. And to be able to pivot that and say, I can do these things for enjoyment has also been a great gift. And still to do them well. I will still often be a leader in a musical group when I'm there, but it's not the same as, having to audition or be at this premier level. I play music because it's fun. I play violin with my daughter. I'm not good at it at all, but I can manage it because I have 40 years of strings experience. And it's purely for the sake of sitting next to her and being her stand partner. So I think all of those pieces complement each other. And when I coach, particularly medical students, I encourage them, like, all those things that made you an amazing candidate that you suddenly leave at the door, bring them with you, and it might not be to the same degree or level, but, your guitar or, your speech and debate, like, all of that matters. And don't let that die. Don't let that be left behind. Stopping playing cello when I got to medical school was probably the worst decision ever. Because it's liberating, but it really makes your brain smarter. And Dr. Ken Yee, who you probably remember, internal medicine doc in Muskegon, when I got to his rotation, maybe the 3rd month I was there, he's reading an article about how strings players are smarter because it's the right and left side of the brain and where it stimulates. So he was trying to teach himself guitar. And I remember thinking, man, like, why did I stop playing cello during those first years of medical school when it would have helped my brain on so many levels? And I did notice, right, there was more of a struggle sometimes to study, probably because I had abandoned that practice. And so I think it all ties together, and we might not do it all to the same degree or level or frequency, but bringing as much of yourself with you wherever you go, I think is so important and powerful, and especially in medicine, because we get so blinded and so specialized and so niched. Like, be a human first, and your medicine will get better as a result.
That resonates so strongly with me. As you know, in training, and this is true for nurses, it's true for physicians, we're taught to pain block. Don't pay attention to your bio needs. Don't need to eat this meal, you can eat later. You don't get enough sleep. There are so many ways that we learn to pain block and almost dehumanize our experience. And when I coach, a lot of times we talk about the integrating life. It's not work-life balance, it's really work-life integration. And I think you just described that in the most beautiful way that I've heard, bringing your whole self to work. And then I really appreciate how you intentionally use transferable skills to become a more well-rounded physician or author or whatnot. And so thank you for that. Amelia, the pod is about making waves. And we use the acronym WAVES to represent women amplifying voices and elevating success. It's really about collaboration and helping each other and community. And I know that's something that you also focus on. So when you think about making waves, if you could leave our listeners with one challenge or call to action that would help everyone's collective success in the space of healthcare, what would it be?
Yeah, I'd love that. And I think some of what we touched on here, so maybe checking in. What is something within me that has been dormant or left behind that I can breathe more life into? And my counter question is always, how do you see yourself for the health of all things? And I think asking that question to ourselves, like, how is my work for the health of all things? And in medicine, it can seem obvious, but maybe dig a little deeper, like, how is what I stand for the health of all things? And that might be protesting in this day and age, and it might be volunteering at your kid's school, and it might be, lecturing on nutrition in your community. It might not be your typical clinical encounter, but let yourself see that what you do already is. You don't have to do anything more or anything new, but reframe how you see what you're doing and notice the impact that you're having. And I think when we have that lens, we have much more ability to lean in rather than thinking I have to go do something more and new and bigger and better. It's like, what I'm doing is already amazing and good and for health. Let me amplify it, augment it, and again, using that word resonance, bring it into the space that really alivens all of these parts within me.
So beautifully said. Thank you again for joining the pod and sharing your leadership and coaching and physician journey. It's been an absolute joy, and I'm sure our listeners are going to love it. And for our listeners, I'm going to add a couple reflection questions. So you already put a beautiful question out there for people to reflect on. And what I'm going to add is, who in your life embodies the kind of wholeness that Dr. Bueche described today? Someone who shows up fully as themselves across all their roles. And then take it one step further and share their story with someone this week, someone that might need that inspiration. The second reflection question is, think about the different roles and identities that you hold, and which parts of yourself have you been keeping separate? What might become possible when you let them inform each other?
I love that.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the pod. I invite you to join our pod every month as we empower one another, fostering a world where women in healthcare leadership thrive.